Before we begin, if you believe that even the quietest hearts hold the loudest stories, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more tales that linger long after the last word. Now, let me take you somewhere unexpected. The bouquet. Felt too cold in my hands. Cream roses. Elegant, lifeless. Someone else had chosen them. Someone else had wrapped them. They weren't mine. Nothing about this day was mine. Not the dress, not the ring I hadn't even worn yet, and certainly not the man I was about to meet behind the door marked 1406. The Lexington crest rose over Midtown like something carved from a forgotten century. Rich wood paneling, gold-framed mirrors, chandeliers that hummed faintly above polished marble floors. I had never stepped into a place this grand in my life, and now I was walking through it like I belonged, though everything inside me screamed otherwise. My heels made no sound on the plush red carpet. I reached the door and stood still, hearing nothing but my own breath. My fingers tightened around the bouquet. My mother had always said flowers were for the heart, not the hands. But my heart wasn't here. It was somewhere in a hospital room in Queens, tethered to a quiet monitor, waiting for oxygen and mercy. I knocked once, though I wasn't sure why. This wasn't a hotel room I was renting. It was the first night of a life I hadn't asked for. The door opened. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Tall, severe, tailored gray suit, shoulders like sculpted stone. His face was sharp, unreadable, as though he had long ago practiced the art of not revealing a single thought more than necessary. His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker. Recognition? Surprise? No. Just calculation. "You're here," he said, voice low. Smooth, final. "I am," I replied, though it came out more like a breath than a statement. "I'm Ethan Vu." He stepped back, allowing me in. I crossed the threshold, stepping into a suite bathed in warm amber light. The scent of cedarwood lingered in the air, faint but constant, like something burned long ago and never quite faded. Ethan closed the door behind me. "From today on, you are my wife. No warmth, no pretense, no attempt at charm." It was a line delivered like the period at the end of a contract. I swallowed. "I didn't agree to this." "You didn't object either," he said, moving past me, heading toward the window. "You arrived, that's what mattered." I followed him with my eyes. "I came because I had no choice. My mother is in excellent care," he interrupted, not turning around. "She's now under a private medical team, and your father's debt has been cleared." Those were the terms. His back remained to me, hands clasped behind him, as if he couldn't be bothered to look at the girl he'd just bought. And maybe he didn't need to. He already owned the terms. He didn't need to own my gaze. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Not with my mother lying in a hospital bed, breathing through machines we couldn't afford. Not with the weight of my father's choices dragging behind me like an anchor I hadn't tied. I stood there, stiff and small, holding a bouquet meant for someone else's fairy tale. "I'll have someone show you to your room," Ethan said after a pause. "You'll have everything you need. Except love," I thought. Except the truth. He left the room without another word. I found myself alone in a space too elegant for someone like me. Thick carpets, tall windows with golden drapes, a faint jazz melody playing somewhere far down the hallway. I walked through the suite like a stranger in a museum, afraid to touch anything. When I entered the bedroom, mine apparently, the first thing I did was sit on the edge of the bed. The silence folded around me like a heavy quilt. I let the bouquet rest in my lap and opened my suitcase to feel something familiar. A sweater, a scarf, anything that smelled like home. Instead, I found a letter. It was tucked carefully between the folds of a soft, hand-knit cardigan my mother had packed for me. The envelope was old, worn at the edges, the paper yellowed with time. No address. No stamp. Just 3 words in her careful, slanted handwriting. For E. Vu. My breath caught. I turned the envelope over. No date. Nothing else. I stared at the name for a long time, as if willing it to mean something different. But there it was again. Vu. His last name. Ethan's. I'd never heard her mention him before. Not once. And yet this letter had clearly been meant for him. A part of me wanted to tear it open. Another part wanted to pretend it didn't exist. Instead, I set it down carefully on the nightstand beside the untouched roses. I didn't have the strength to read it. Not tonight. Not until I could ask the right questions, and not until I was ready for the answers. I lay back on the bed, eyes on the ceiling. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the city lights outside, far below. My mother used to hum lullabies, in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep. Songs in Vietnamese, soft and round like the corners of our small home. I remembered one in particular. She'd sing it while folding clothes. Trai tim qua con la na qua me. Your heart is my home. I closed my eyes. And for a moment, I let myself pretend I was still in that kitchen. Still a girl with simple dreams. Not a young woman wearing a wedding dress no one had asked her to choose. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed quietly. Somewhere in this building, Ethan Vu probably sat in silence too, as untouched by emotion as the crystal glass on his nightstand. I didn't know who he was. Not really. But now I had a letter that suggested my mother had. And suddenly this wasn't just an arrangement, it was a mystery. I woke early, but the silence had gotten there first. The suite was hushed in the way only expensive spaces could be. Thick walls, thick carpets, thick expectations. I sat up in the wide bed, my hair tangled from restless sleep, the lavender-scented pillow still creased from the weight of yesterday. The letter sat untouched on the nightstand. I hadn't dared to read it. Instead, I walked barefoot to the window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. 14 floors below, the city had already come alive. Honking horns, tiny people moving in hurried patterns, coffee carts wheeling steam into the winter air. I used to love mornings in Queens. The clatter of pots in the neighbor's kitchen, the distant hum of the subway, the voice of my mother calling me to breakfast. Here, mornings felt like museum exhibits, quiet, too still to be real. I found the robe someone had left for me, soft gray cotton, neatly folded with a tag I didn't recognize. I slipped it on and padded into the hallway. The scent of fresh tea floated from somewhere down the corridor. It wasn't welcoming. It was controlled, curated. A young housekeeper stood outside the kitchen with a silver tray. She smiled politely when she saw me. "Good morning, Mrs. Vu," she said. Mrs. Vu. The words didn't fit yet. Like a coat tailored for someone taller, someone stronger. "There's breakfast waiting in the dining room," she added. I nodded, too tired to protest the title. The dining room was straight from a design magazine. Walnut table, white orchids, light pouring in from sheer curtains. I sat alone at the end of the table where a small setting had been prepared. Porridge, a poached egg, sliced fruit arranged like a painting. I ate slowly, spoon by spoon, but my mind was elsewhere. Had he read the letter? Did he know my mother? And if he did, why hadn't he said anything? When I finished eating, I returned to my room to find my phone charging beside the bed. That small detail, someone remembering to charge my phone, felt strangely intimate. A decision made on my behalf, but not unkind. I checked for messages. None from my father, of course, but there was a missed call from the hospital. My fingers trembled slightly as I called back. "Yes, your mother is stable today," the nurse said. "Actually, her private room was upgraded last night. She's being monitored by one of our top physicians now." We were told to call if there was any change. I frowned. Wait, upgraded? Yes, the fees were handled by Mr. Vu, I believe. There, it was. A twist I hadn't seen coming. I didn't know what surprised me more, that Ethan had paid for it, or that he hadn't told me. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The air felt different, not lighter, but warmer somehow. Back home, whenever things went wrong, when my father gambled away our rent, when my mother collapsed from exhaustion, I would always be the one to patch the cracks. Not just practically, but emotionally. A warm towel on the forehead. A bowl of soup on the stove. A whispered reassurance in the dark. We'll be okay. No one had ever done that for me. Until now. Except, I didn't know why. I wandered into the hallway again, unsure of what I was even looking for. And then I heard it. A faint sound, muffled behind a closed door. Piano. Not a song I recognized. Something simple. Hesitant. I followed the sound until I reached a half-open door. I paused. Ethan was sitting at the grand piano. Alone. Shirt sleeves, rolled to his elbows. Head slightly bowed. His fingers moved slowly, unsure, as if he were playing from memory instead of skill. He looked human. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I watched him for a full minute, my heart oddly tight. And then he looked up. Our eyes met. He said nothing. Neither did I. He stood, calm, composed again, like a mask settling back over his face. You should rest, he said simply. I've been resting, I replied, surprised by my own voice. He tilted his head, eyes scanning mine as if searching for something. He didn't find it. He nodded, once, then left the room without a word. The piano bench creaked as it cooled in his absence. Later that night, I called my mother. She was groggy but stable. She didn't know about the upgraded room, or Ethan's involvement. She just said one thing before falling back asleep. Remember what I told you. You don't owe anyone your silence. After the call, I sat by the window again, the city lights blinking like distant lighthouses. I thought of Ethan, alone at the piano, playing notes that didn't belong to any song. I thought of the letter I hadn't opened. And I thought of the nurse's voice. Mr. Vu paid for everything. Why would a man so cold do something so kind, and then hide it? I didn't have answers. Only more questions. But for the first time since I stepped into this strange new life, I felt something stir. A question I hadn't let myself ask until now. What if he isn't just keeping me here? What if he's waiting for me to see something? The letter sat on the nightstand for 3 days before I dared to touch it again. Every morning, I would glance at it as if it might somehow open itself. Every night I'd think about unfolding it, then leave it where it was. It felt like something sacred, or maybe something dangerous. My mother had kept it for decades, tucked it away in the lining of her memories like a secret she hoped would stay buried. But secrets don't stay buried forever. It was the 4th morning when I finally picked it up. The paper was softer than I expected, delicate and time-worn. The ink had faded just enough to suggest it had been written by hand, in a moment of care, not urgency. The handwriting was my mother's. I would have known it anywhere. My hands trembled as I unfolded the page. Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I have the right to write it. You were kind to me in a house that was never mine. You looked at me like I was more than what they called me. You gave me music and silence and space to breathe. I left not because I wanted to, but because we both knew I couldn't stay. I kept the song you wrote me. I still hum it sometimes, when I'm alone. If life had been different, maybe we would have been different too. I sat there, motionless. The letter falling slightly against my lap. Her signature, my mother. My heart slowed, then stuttered. I read it again, and again. It wasn't long, not even a full page, but it was enough. My mother and Ethan had known each other, not as strangers, not as business associates, as something else, something quiet, something nearly, but not quite, love. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I saw myself, and for the first time, I didn't know what I was looking at. My face, my mother's cheekbones, my father's eyes. But behind all of that, a new question. Forming, was I here because of a deal, or because of a memory that never let go? I left the room with the letter in hand. I found Ethan where I somehow knew he'd be, in the library, surrounded by warm wood and old books, standing near the window with his hands in his pockets. He turned before I spoke. Our eyes met. I found this, I said simply. He didn't ask what I meant. He saw it in my hands. He nodded, once, slowly. The kind of nod that comes from a man who has waited years for something to surface, and both dreaded and needed it too. She wrote it before she left, he said. She never gave it to me. I didn't say anything. My breath caught in my throat. She was young. So was I, he continued. Your grandfather hired her as a housemaid. I was home from boarding school. It wasn't what people would assume. We spoke. She listened. I played music. That was all. But it wasn't nothing, I said. No, he admitted. It wasn't nothing. I looked at him differently now. Not just as a man who had bought a marriage, but as a boy who once gave my mother music. A boy who once let her feel seen. She used to hum a tune when she cooked, I said. Maybe it was yours. His lips curved, not into a smile, but into something softer. It had no name. I never finished it. A silence settled between us. Not tense, just full. You never told me, I said. I didn't know how, he replied. I didn't want to bring her pain into this, or yours. And yet you brought me here. He stepped closer, but not too close. You needed help. I had the means. And maybe I wanted to repay a kindness that I never could. Back then, I studied him for a long moment. The lines in his face, the heaviness in his gaze. For the first time, I wondered how long he had carried this memory, how often he had thought of her, how much of our arrangement was business, and how much was grief. She left because she thought it was the right thing, he said quietly. She never said goodbye. She didn't believe she could stay, I answered. Even when people were kind, she never felt she belonged. She did, he said. More than anyone. I felt the weight of those words. And then I felt my own heart changing shape inside my chest. The man in front of me was no longer just a cold executive in a sharp suit. He was someone who had once loved quietly and lost quietly. Someone who had kept a room open, not literally, but in the quiet parts of himself, for someone he never truly let go of. I didn't cry, but something in me softened. That night, I returned the letter to my drawer. Not to forget it, but to honor it. It was no longer a mystery. It was a memory. One I was part of now. Whether I had planned to be or not, I sat by the window again, watching the city flicker. Down the hallway, the piano was quiet, but in my head, I heard the song. The one he never finished. The one she used to hum. The one that was never named, until now. I found my father's name in the one place I hadn't wanted to look. A debt ledger. It wasn't meant for me. I had walked into the study to return a book, nothing more. But the leather-bound folder was open on Ethan's desk, and there it was, in bold black type. Trung Tran, delinquent account, 17,400 USD creditor, Shoe Holdings, third-party recovery scheduled. It felt like a stone in my stomach. He hadn't told me. No one had. I thought, my father's debts had been cleared after the wedding. Apparently, not all of them. I stood there for a long time, unmoving. The smell of leather, ink, and faint cedar surrounded me like a fog. When Ethan entered the room moments later, I didn't hide what I was looking at. I didn't speak, either. He walked past me, calm as always, but his steps slowed as he caught the page. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly, but I did. There was no anger in my voice, just something quieter, heavier. "You said everything was handled," I continued. He gave a short nod, barely perceptible. "I thought it was." I looked down at the page again. My father's name. My shame. "I have to fix this," I said. "It's already being handled." "No," I cut in. "This time I'll handle it." Later that afternoon, I took the subway to a corner of Queens I hadn't visited in years. My father lived in a walk-up now, a third-floor apartment with peeling paint and a flickering hallway light. I knocked. He opened the door, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. "Lena," he said, startled. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He sighed, turning away. "It wasn't your burden." "Then why am I the one who keeps paying it?" He sat down on a frayed couch and rubbed his temples. "I thought if you married him, it'd be enough." "I married him so Mom could live, not so you could keep gambling." His face crumbled a little, but not enough. He still didn't see what I had lost, what I had given up. "I'm not here to beg or lecture," I said. "I'm here to tell you it ends now. I'll cover this one last time. But after that, if I hear your name on another document like this, I walk away. For good." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I left the apartment and didn't look back. When I returned to the house that night, the hallway lights were dimmed, and the smell of tea drifted from the kitchen. I paused. It wasn't from the staff. It was the scent of jasmine, my mother's favorite. I followed it, expecting one of the maids. But it wasn't a maid. It was Ethan. He stood at the stove, a teapot steaming behind him, a ceramic cup set gently on the counter. "I called the creditor this morning," he said without turning. "I paid it in full." I stared at him, stunned. "Why?" He poured the tea, slow and steady. "Because you shouldn't have to be the one carrying everyone's weight." His voice was quiet. Not soft, exactly. Just real. I stepped closer. The kitchen felt warmer than any room in the house. "I told you I'd handle it," I whispered. "I know. But sometimes people need help even when they don't ask." He turned then, handed me the cup. The heat seeped into my fingers. I felt it. Not just the warmth, but the gesture. It wasn't grand. It wasn't flashy. But it was care. Real care. "I sold part of my stake in the company to make it happen," he added, almost as an afterthought. "What?" My breath caught. He shrugged lightly. "Control doesn't matter much when it keeps someone from drowning." The tea shook slightly in my hands. "You gave up power," I said. He met my eyes. I gave up what didn't matter. I didn't know what to say. So I sat at the small table. The same table where my mother used to let me draw when the stove was on, where I'd trace shapes in spilled rice with my pinky finger. Ethan sat too, across from me. We didn't talk for a while, just the sound of tea pouring, the gentle clink of porcelain, the silence that no longer felt so sharp. "I thought you were like him," I said finally. Cold, controlling, detached. I was, he said. For a long time. But not anymore. His gaze held mine. Not with you. And there it was. No declaration, no passion, just honesty. That night, I checked on my mother via video call. She was asleep, a quilt pulled high under her chin. I watched her breathe, steady and slow, and remembered the times she'd stayed up late sewing my school uniforms, her fingers red from work. Now someone else was sewing safety into my life, quietly, without asking for thanks. Before I went to bed, I walked back into the kitchen. The tea set was gone, but the warmth remained. It started with a cough. Subtle, distant, the kind you could miss if you weren't paying attention. But I had been paying attention, more than I wanted to admit. For days, I'd noticed Ethan moving slower, taking shorter meetings, disappearing into his study, and not returning until long past midnight. At first, I thought it was stress. But that morning, when I passed the library, I saw him hunched over, his desk, his hand pressed to his forehead. I didn't say anything, just kept walking. By the afternoon, he hadn't come down for lunch. By evening, the staff had left his tray untouched outside his door. I stood at the threshold for nearly 5 minutes before knocking. No answer. I pushed gently. The door opened, without resistance. The lights were low. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. Papers were scattered across his desk, along with an untouched cup of tea now gone cold. Ethan lay on the sofa, one arm draped across his eyes, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his breathing uneven. He didn't stir when I stepped closer. I hesitated, then gently placed my hand on his forehead. Warm, too warm. A fever. I glanced around the room, unsure of what to do next, until my gaze landed on the scarf I'd left folded in my closet drawer just days before. The one my mother had embroidered for me when I turned 18. Cream cotton. A thin, simple border stitched in deep blue. A small lily in one corner. She'd said lilies were for quiet strength. I returned with it minutes later, dampened with cool water. I knelt beside him and dabbed his forehead, careful not to wake him. "You always take care of everyone," I whispered. "Let someone do it for you just this once." He stirred then, slightly. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then locked onto mine. "You're here," he murmured, voice low and hoarse. "I'm always here," I said. He blinked slowly, as if unsure whether I was real. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this. You're human," I said softly. "Even you're allowed that." A pause. Then, "That scarf. It was hers, wasn't it?" I hesitated. "No. She made it for me." He looked at the stitching, the careful curves of blue thread. "She taught you how to endure," he said. I nodded. "She also taught me how to forgive." His eyes softened. A shadow of something passed through them. Regret, maybe. Or gratitude. "Thank you," he said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat beside him on the rug until his breathing evened out again. I didn't leave the room. I didn't return the scarf to the drawer. That night, I simply stayed, watching the fire, listening to the sound of someone finally letting go, if only for a few hours. The next morning, he woke before I did. When I opened my eyes, he was sitting upright, a blanket draped around his shoulders, the scarf folded neatly on the table beside a fresh cup of tea. "I never get sick," he said, as if embarrassed by the admission. "You're allowed," I replied, stretching slowly. "I didn't ask you to stay," he said. "I know. He looked at me then, not with gratitude, not with obligation, just looked, fully, clearly, as if something had shifted in the way he saw me. "Most people want something when they help me," he said. "You didn't ask for anything." "I didn't have to," I replied, "because I saw what you needed." The silence between us was gentle now, not awkward, like an old sweater you put on without thinking. He stood and poured a second cup of tea, handed it to me. It was jasmine. "My mother's favorite," I said. "I know." We sat there, sipping tea in the quiet of morning. No declarations, no confessions, just two people beginning to share space, warmth, and time. Later that afternoon, I went to the garden, craving air and something simpler than silk curtains and chandeliers. I found the gardener kneeling near a patch of lilies. I watched her work. For a while, hands deep in the soil, steady and patient. I thought of my mother again, of her hands. I returned to the house and pulled out the scarf, ran my fingers over the stitching, then folded it with care and left it on Ethan's desk with a note. For the days when the world is too much. L. That evening, he didn't mention it, but I found the scarf draped over the back of his reading chair, and that was enough. I didn't expect to find him in the study that morning. And I certainly didn't expect him to make space for me at the table. But there he was, already seated at the long walnut desk, sleeves rolled, collar slightly undone, glasses perched on his nose like he'd forgotten they were even there. The morning light fell across his hands as they moved steadily over a set of architectural plans. He didn't look up when I entered, so I hovered by the door, unsure if I should speak. "You can sit," he said, without turning. I blinked. "I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting." He gestured to the chair across from him. So I took it. The table was covered in papers, blueprints, contracts, a half-finished sketch in pencil. There was a quiet hum in the room, not from any machine, but from the steady rhythm of work. It was comforting, familiar, in an unexpected way, like the quiet of my mother's sewing machine as I did homework beside her as a child. I pulled a notebook from my bag and began organizing the grant application I'd been meaning to finish for the clinic where my mother received treatment. My pen scratched softly across the page. Ethan's pencil glided across his. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every so often I'd glance up. So would he. At one point, he reached across the table to hand me a paper clip, and our fingers brushed. Just a second. No sparks. No drama. But it stopped me anyway. Because this time, I didn't want to pull away. I looked up. He was already watching me. "Are you always this quiet when you work?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly. "No, only when I'm thinking too much." "What are you thinking about?" He paused. Whether I've been building walls or holding up ceilings, I wasn't sure what he meant, but I understood the feeling. We worked in silence for the next hour. Around noon, he stood. "Hungry?" I blinked again. "I didn't think you ate lunch." "I don't, but I thought maybe you would." I followed him to the kitchen, where he opened a cabinet and pulled out a box of dry noodles. "You're cooking?" I asked, half smiling. He looked at me over his shoulder. "Don't sound so surprised." "I just assumed you had staff for that." "I do, but I lived alone for 15 years. I didn't survive on air." He filled a pot with water, lit the stove. As he worked, I leaned against the counter, watching his movements. Measured, focused, strangely elegant. He moved like someone who didn't need to speak to make his presence known. Someone who had learned that silence wasn't weakness. It was control. "I used to cook with my mother," I said. "She'd hum old love songs while chopping scallions." "What did she teach you?" I smiled. "That broth needs time, and so do people." He looked over. His eyes held mine longer than they needed to. When the noodles were ready, he added, "Nothing fancy. Just sesame oil, soy, and a hint of ginger." We ate in the breakfast nook by the window, 2 bowls between us, steam rising like questions neither of us was ready to ask. Halfway through the meal, he reached for the napkins and accidentally knocked over my glass. Water spilled across the table. "Sorry," he said, moving quickly. But I was already there. We both reached for the same cloth. His hand landed over mine. We froze. I looked up. His eyes weren't cold anymore. Not guarded. Not unreadable. Just present. "I used to think strength meant keeping people out," he said quietly. "And now?" He hesitated. "Now I'm not sure." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. After we cleaned up, I lingered in the study as he went to take a call. I looked at the sketch he'd left behind. It wasn't blueprints this time. It was a garden. Open spaces, benches beneath trees, a winding path that led to nowhere in particular. It was gentle. I traced the outline with my finger and wondered what kind of man designed serenity when no one was looking. That night, I found a new book waiting for me on my nightstand. The Language of Flowers. No note. No signature. Just the quiet kind of gift you leave for someone when you've begun to learn what they carry in their heart. I opened it. Inside, under the section for lilies, someone had underlined a single line. Lilies signify restored innocence and the quiet return of love. I wasn't looking for the conversation. I wasn't eavesdropping. But sometimes the truth doesn't wait for you to be ready. I was passing the study when I heard his voice. Ethan. Firm, composed, but different. A quiet strain in the way he spoke. I paused in the hallway, not out of curiosity, but because something in me just stopped. "I gave her what she needed," he said, "and in return, she gave me peace of mind." A pause. "No, it's not about love. That was never part of the agreement." Another pause, then the click of a pen. "No, she doesn't know, and she doesn't need to." My fingers curled tightly around the edge of the doorframe. I didn't need to hear the rest, whatever progress we had made, the shared tea, the lingering looks, the book he left on my nightstand. It all unraveled in a breath. A line. "It's not about love." I returned to my room, packed slowly, deliberately, not with rage, but with something deeper. Disappointment. I thought we were building something, even if we didn't name it. But maybe it was just construction to him. Plans on paper, carefully measured, bound by timelines. When I zipped my suitcase, I didn't cry. I'd done this before. Left places I wanted to stay. Smiled through goodbyes I didn't choose. I left the scarf on the bed. The one with the lilies, the one my mother made. If it meant something to him, he'd understand why I didn't take it. If it didn't, then it didn't matter. By the time I reached the front door, the house was quiet. The doorman was surprised to see me with luggage. "Mrs. Vu, do you need a car?" "No," I said. "I'll take the train." The city greeted me with cold air and blinking lights. I boarded the subway back to Queens, back to the familiar clatter of footsteps, the smell of street food, and the cracked tile floors of my childhood. I returned to the old TM May, still half empty, still dimly lit, the sewing machines covered in cloth. I sat behind the counter, my hands resting on the wooden surface where my mother once taught me how to thread a needle. The next morning, I made tea in the tiny back kitchen and poured it into 2 mismatched cups. One for me, one out, of habit. Old habits die slowly. By afternoon, I had taken out one of the machines. The rhythm of the needle gave me peace, something to do with my hands while my heart tried to unremember the sound of his voice. That evening, the bell over the shop door rang. I looked up, and there he was, Ethan, not in a suit, not polished. His shirt was wrinkled, his coat too thin for the cold. His eyes, dark, quiet, tired, met mine. I didn't speak. He held something in his hand, a scarf, the one I'd left behind. "I never meant for you to hear it that way," he said. I stayed silent. I was talking to a board member. He was pressing me on the legitimacy of our marriage. He wanted to know if it was real. He took a step forward. I said what I had to say, to protect you, to keep you out of more questions. But I didn't mean it. I folded my arms. "So, what did you mean?" His voice softened. "That I don't need you to pay anything. I don't need you to fix anything, I just..." He looked down, then back at me. "I just need you to stay." There it was. No contracts, no conditions, just a man, tired, flawed, asking. I stared at him, heart racing, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Like he'd never asked anyone for something he couldn't buy. "Why?" I whispered. He stepped forward again, this time holding out the scarf like a peace offering. "Because when you left, the house felt like a building again. And when you're there, it feels like a home." I took the scarf, slowly, ran my fingers along the stitching, the small lily in the corner. He watched my hands like he was memorizing them. Then I met his eyes. I wasn't running away. I was protecting myself. "I know," he said. "I would have done the same." Outside, the sky had turned the color of steel. Snow was beginning to fall, soft and silent, layering the streets like a clean page. Inside, the heater hummed. The tea had gone cold. I didn't invite him to sit. I just moved behind the counter, pulled out a second cup, and poured him a fresh one. He sat quietly, scarf draped across his knees, both hands wrapped around the mug like he needed its warmth to stay upright. We didn't talk much after that. We just drank tea in a half-forgotten shop. On a day that could have broken us, but didn't. The house didn't look different when I returned. The chandelier still glowed like frozen stars. The marble floors still echoed in silence. But something had changed. I didn't walk in like someone entering a stranger's home. I didn't carry luggage or fear. Just a single overnight bag and a quiet promise to myself. This time, I stay on my own terms. Ethan met me in the foyer. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He waited. And I walked toward him. Not because I owed him, not because I needed protection, but because something inside me knew. He was no longer the man who bought my presence. He was the man who missed my absence. "Your room is still." "The same," he said gently. "I know," I replied, "but I won't need it." He blinked. "You want a different room?" I shook my head. "No, I want the same room, but not alone." There was no smile, just a breath. Like he'd been holding it for too long. He didn't touch me. Not yet. But he looked at me like a man memorizing every part of peace before it disappears. Later, I walked through the rooms I used to avoid. The music room, the garden Ethan once sketched, the quiet kitchen where the scent of jasmine tea lingered like a memory no one dared wipe away. And when I entered the library, I found something waiting for me, a new book, bound in soft leather. No title on the cover. Inside was a dedication to the woman who walked through the wrong door and gave me back the right heart. I sat down in the window seat, the same spot where I'd once wondered who Ethan Vu really was. This time, I didn't wonder. Because I knew. That night we cooked together. Simple food, garlic, ginger, rice warming on the stove. We moved around each other like people who had learned to share space, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. He passed me the ladle. I passed him the salt. When we sat down to eat, he reached for my hand, not as a question, but as a habit. My fingers folded into his. We didn't say grace. We didn't need to. The warmth between our palms was prayer enough. After dinner, we sat on the couch. The fire hummed, soft and steady. I rested my head on his shoulder. He didn't shift or tense, just let me be. Do you remember the song you played the night I first heard you? I asked. He nodded slowly. I never finished it. Would you? He hesitated. Only if you'll help me name it. I thought for a long moment. Then I whispered, call it belonging. He closed his eyes, just briefly, then kissed the top of my head. Not a kiss of possession, but of peace. Upstairs, my mother's old scarf still hung in the closet, and beside it, on the nightstand, the same lilies he'd once underlined in a book now sat fresh in a glass vase. Lilies for renewal. Lilies for return. That night, we lay side by side, not tangled in passion, but wrapped in something deeper. Trust. His breath steady beside mine. Our fingers intertwined beneath the covers. The house no longer cold. Ethan, I said, voice nearly a whisper. This started as a prison. I know, he said. But now, he turned slightly, eyes on mine. Now it's home, he finished. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. No contracts, no debts, no past. Only two people, once strangers in silence, who had chosen to stay. If this story stayed with you, even just in a quiet moment or a soft memory, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It's a simple way to say, tell me another one, and I'd be honored to do just that.